Welcome to today's show. I'm really excited to share with you this formula that I use for protein. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about protein and how much that you should eat and how to really play around with your own numbers. I'm going to teach you one of the tactics that I actually teach inside of my curriculum to my clients in Empower. And by the end of it, you're going to have a range that you can use to play around with calculating your own protein macro. So when it comes to our nutrition and when it comes to building muscle and it comes to losing fat, our protein intake is really important. So if you've watched some of my other videos or listened to podcast episodes where I've shared my story, one of the things I discovered in my 2 years of doing CrossFit, where I lost muscle and gained fat despite lifting really heavy weights, was I was not eating enough carbs and I was under eating protein. When I actually started to pay attention to how much protein I was eating, I was shocked to discover how little protein I was actually ingesting. It would be like 70 grams a day or 85 grams a day. Now that amount of protein is enough for just basic health and wellness. But if you are trying to optimize your body composition, or you're trying to build muscle, you're trying to perform athletically, you're trying to make strength gains, then it makes more sense to pay attention to your protein intake. It will actually benefit you more if you really hone in on your protein intake. And when I scaled my protein up from that like 75 to 85 grams to more like 120 to 130 grams a day, I noticed that I lost fat more easily. I got stronger in the gym. I built and retained muscle. And those things were really important to me. So as you age, you will lose muscle every single year. And so I saw this as a nurse. I saw people come into the hospital so frail, so weak they couldn't even push their own body weight up in bed. And I saw that and was like, I do not want this for myself. And so I really made it a priority to start focusing on my protein intake. So one of the things that a lot of women need to commit to is eating more protein. Most women are under eating protein. All right, raise your hand if you think that you are under eating protein. It's very common because, one, protein sources require more effort to cook. They require more effort to prepare. They're not as convenient and on the go, right? When you go to like a drive-through, it's easy to get something that's high in carbs and fats, but less so in protein. Protein is a more expensive nutrient overall. It's a more expensive macronutrient. So it costs more to raise, it costs more to grow protein because, if you're eating animal protein, that animal is more expensive to eat than plants, and there's not as much protein in plants, although you can get protein from plants. So it's just very easy to undereat protein. So if you're undereating protein, don't beat yourself up about it. Don't feel bad. Just know it's very common and it's very understandable that you're undereating protein. But if you're committed to changing your body and being stronger and building muscle and losing fat, then it is important that you're willing and intentional. So, right, anytime we make a change in life, number one, we just got to be willing to make a change. First, we got to be aware that there's a problem. Second, we got to be willing to make a change. And we have to be intentional about it. So you're not just going to magically hit your protein intake every day. It requires foresight, planning, intentionality. It also requires, coming up with multiple protein sources that you enjoy that, hit your macros, but you also are things that you enjoy eating. For example, I love egg whites. I actually prefer egg whites to eggs. I still eat eggs at times. Sometimes I'll crave eggs, and so I'll make eggs. But I prefer egg whites in general. I actually prefer the flavor or the texture of them, the way they make my body feel better than eggs. And they're a great source of lean protein. Another source of protein I love is cottage cheese. I love the Good Culture brand. That's actually the only brand of cottage cheese I will eat. So I specifically love that brand. I used to eat a lot of protein bars. I'm not as into protein bars right now, but they're still a great source of protein for on the go. So you have to find the things that you enjoy eating, and you've got to be willing to be creative, to think outside the box, to get outside your rut, to try new things. I also love like having turkey slices and making little turkey sandwiches, or sometimes if I'm hungry and like about to cook dinner, I'll like snack on some turkey slices because I know that's a great way to boost my protein for the day. And you have to be willing to be in a growth mindset. When we're making changes in life, we have to be willing to say, you know what? The way that I've been doing it is no longer working for me as well, and I want to try something new. That is being committed to a growth mindset. And I try to always be focused on improving and refining in life. There's a difference between always striving for things and always trying to be better versus just like being interested in improving and refining your processes in life. Okay, so let's dive into the formula. I'm really excited to share with you how to actually think about your protein intake. So science supports, and there's a lot of great like physique research out there and different research articles. There was a great meta-analysis done on protein intake and how the protein intake for most people is too low to optimize muscle mass as they age. And so there's a lot of good research supporting these numbers. So in general, if you eat 0.7 to 1.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight or ideal body weight, that is a great place to be in. Now, that's quite a range, 0.7 to 1.3. So let's break that down a little bit and talk about it more distinctly. So the first thing to understand is calculating it based off of your body weight or your ideal body weight. So if you are 200 pounds and you really desire to be at like 150, if you are, say 5'4" and 200 pounds, you don't need to eat 200 grams of protein a day, right? You need to think about, okay, what weight in general is probably like a more reasonable weight for me? Where's the weight I'm trying to get back to in general? Where do I feel best in my skin? Think about that weight. Okay, it was 140 to 150. So then you would want to calculate your protein based off of that number, not what you currently weigh. So then you would take 140 and multiply that by 0.7 or multiply it by 1.3 and you would get a range. Now, for example, if you're 125 pounds, then your protein range could be 88 to 162 grams. That's quite a range. So you might feel really confused. Okay, Heather, you're teaching me this formula, 0.7 to 1.3, but the range is still 88 to 162. Like, how do I pick a number in between those things? So I'm going to give you some different ways to think about this. The first thing that I recommend doing is if you are weight training, if you are running, doing cardio, if you're engaged in a lot of physical exercise, manual labor, then I recommend going on the higher side. So maybe not 162 unless you're a professional CrossFit athlete. But if you are very active, then I would recommend being in that like 120 to 130 grams. So that's more like 1 to 1.1 grams of protein per pound of body weight. If you are less active, if you are just getting back into moving your body, if you are, pretty sedentary, then start with the lower range and scale up. A great rule of thumb I like to teach my clients is try to hit at least triple digits every day. Try to hit at least 100 grams of protein every day, and that will help with satiety. It'll turn on the thermic effect of food, so you'll get that calorie burn just from digesting protein. It will improve your muscle growth and muscle protein synthesis, turning on muscle protein synthesis. Also, people ask me about timing of food. Protein is something that's actually valuable to split up into doses. You'll also feel extremely full if you try to eat 50 to 60 grams of protein at one meal. So I recommend spacing it out and having 25 to 30 grams at breakfast, lunch, snack, dinner, and spreading it out through your day. So let's just kind of review the numbers. So it's 0.7 to 1.3 grams of protein per pound of body weight or ideal body weight. And while the BMI is a flawed scale that we use to assess body mass index, and there's a lot of problems with that scale, we kind of can generally use it to get like targets for maybe where we would feel our best and where we would want to put our protein. If you happen to be 5'4" and you feel really good at 200 pounds, I would still, and you're not trying to lose weight, I would still put your protein a little bit lower. I would still put it at like 120 if you're like 5'4". If you're a power lifter, or like I said, doing tons of activity, you can scale up. And then play around with your number. If you can consistently hit 90 to 100 grams and you love protein and you want to eat more of it, then scale up to 120 and see how you feel. Scale up to 130. I've played around with my protein from anywhere from 100 to 135, and I feel really good on that whole range. It's when my protein starts to get like 70, 60 that I don't feel good. And if it's like 150, 160, I'm just like, this is too much protein. So tune into your body. We don't want to get so reliant on formulas or equations that we neglect our own intuition and signals from our body. But you can use this framework as a really empowering way to pay attention to how you're eating. And while I do intuitive eating now, I've moved away from doing macros for myself. I still think macros are a foundational, extremely helpful, important, valuable place to start for most people with their nutrition, just because it teaches them so much about the nutritional content of food. And then that helps me make better choices as an intuitive eater. Like knowing how much protein is in egg whites helps me put together a breakfast that's like really good for me, that's satisfying, that I love, that also helps me get my protein in to like sustain my muscle growth, because it's really important to me as I age that I stay as strong as possible. Okay, so your takeaways for this. Aim for 100 grams of protein a day as a woman if you're new to tracking protein. If you're super sedentary, just getting into your nutrition and fitness and health, and if you feel like 100 is a lot, just try for like 80 to 90. And then if you're super active, you love protein, then feel free to scale up more into that like 120, 130 zone. You can use MyFitnessPal to track your protein. Even if you don't want to track your food indefinitely or anything, you could still just track it for 1 week to see where you're at with your protein and how much you're hitting. And then you can also see the portions per meal, which is really helpful. If you would like, you can use this equation, calculate your protein, and drop your number in the comments, and I will give you some feedback on your number and tell you if I think it's appropriate or not. And if you desire more support with understanding how much to eat in order to lose fat and lose weight without forbidding foods, then you can apply for my coaching program. I am interviewing women right now for our spring start date. We're going to start May 2nd. So if you've never worked with me, you're curious if I can help you, then just click the link in my bio, fill out the application, and then we'll chat more and just talk. I never bring people into my program that I can't help. So I have a whole interview process, application process, self-assessment process to make sure it's the right next step for you and it's the right fit for me as a coach too. Because I only want to coach people that I like to work with. Do you know what I mean? I really hope that this topic helped you today and empowered you around your protein intake. You will tend to feel really good when you eat more protein. Just make sure you're balancing it with your other macronutrients. Try spreading it out over multiple meals. So try not to have like huge doses. Play around with your calculations. Let me know what number you come up with. And I look forward to hearing how it goes for you. I will talk to you in my next video, or if you're listening to the podcast, I'll talk to you on the next podcast episode soon. Thanks for tuning in.